May this reading relax your mind and awaken your heart. Chapter 42, Encyclopedia of Hinduism. I guess in this chapter we might be learning more about this mega project that our author's guru had taken up, which was to make the world's first encyclopedia of Hinduism, which already is a daunting task for any encyclopedia, but Hinduism is one of the most diverse religions in the entire world. I think someone once said that Hinduism isn't a religion, it is an encyclopedia of religion. So talk about encyclopedia-ception. Our story takes place from the October of 2009 through to the October of 2014. Let's dive right into her words. We sat in an enormous meeting room in a near circle, actually a sort of square, on couches, chairs, and cushioned footrests in the home of a devotee in Delhi. Pujya Swamiji, my guru, was on a couch covered by a thin, satiny, peach-colored sheet, draped especially for him, as is traditional for religious leaders so they can maintain the purity of their energy without occupying the same fabric as others. Indians are fantastic entertainers, and many homes have living rooms that can hold dozens of people comfortably. To Swamiji's left sat the publisher of the Encyclopedia of Hinduism, owner of one of India's largest publishing houses. To the publisher's left sat the editor-in-chief, former rector of a prestigious Indian university, a professor of English, as he would remind me pointedly in later conversations since I was born. Others who were gathered for our mini-conference included the assistants and editors who were working with other publishers and the editor-in-chief to bring the Encyclopedia of Hinduism to completion. It was the end of October 2009, and I was 8 years old. And this project that Pujya Swamiji had founded more than 2 decades earlier would finally and thankfully be coming to fruition. At this point, 22 years in, the encyclopedia team included more than 1,000 scholars from dozens of cities around the world. Each article had been reviewed by 8 or more renowned scholars for substantive editing, review, copy editing, and finalization. The illustrations had been painstakingly gathered from institutions as renowned as the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, or the IGNCA. Since not long after the first Encyclopedia Project board meeting I'd attended in Pennsylvania in 1997, it had been clear to me that this initiative was more of an academic and logistical challenge than Pujya Swamiji had realized when he first suggested it, and perhaps even more of a challenge than he recognized a decade later. To have nearly 10,000 articles assigned, written, collected, compiled, edited, and finalized would be a mammoth enterprise, even for an academic institution of great repute, with a team of students and professors working on full time. To be undertaken by a religious leader who was dedicated himself in his entire life to sadhana, spiritual practice, and service was, many said, impossible. So, Swamiji established a foundation with branches in India, the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom, and spent years traveling around the world with their chief editor, a South Indian professor emeritus from the University of Virginia, to handpick the scholars who would form the editorial board. By the time I became involved a decade later, work was in full swing, and I knew there wasn't anything I could do. I wasn't a scholar of Hinduism. Then Swamiji said to me one day, "You're a scholar. You should go to Columbia and work for the project." So I spent 3 weeks at the University of South Carolina in the summer of 1998 editing articles, and I vowed to keep my distance from the project after that. It was too big. There were too many moving pieces. It would consume my life. I'd left academia for spirituality. No way was I going back. Please don't make me do this project, I said to Swamiji, still unclear that disciples don't get to choose their service. Puja Swamiji was accommodating. Whether he had no interest in arguing with the daughter of a lawyer, or because he had no interest in arguing specifically with me, or if he simply had complete faith in the divine plan, he never pushed. My role in the Encyclopedia project became simply administrative. I followed up with first the chief editor and then the editor-in-chief in India to make sure articles were being written, edited, and received on time. I handled correspondence with a half-dozen publishers we went through, including Indian and internationally renowned academic presses. I handled contracts, memoranda of understanding, and the communication back and forth to agree on terms. I played Sherlock Holmes when one of the early publishers began falsifying bills, but I was determined never to go near the actual content again. Now we sat at a great moment in history. The board had made a decision in the early days not to publish the encyclopedia volume by volume, but to wait until all 11 volumes were completed and to release them all together. However, the first volume was ready to be printed, and the publishers came with the editor-in-chief and their teams to hand it over to Puja Swamiji for his blessing. The publisher had said that within the next several months, the other 10 volumes would be ready to print. It was simply a matter of layout, design, and illustration selection. The editor-in-chief echoed this. His team had gone through all the articles, and the text was complete. The following spring, in 2010, the Maha Kumbh Mela, the largest spiritual gathering on earth, would be taking place in Haridwar and Rishikesh, where we live. Tens of millions of pilgrims were expected, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama had agreed to come to our ashram for the launch of the encyclopedia. How kind is that? Even though the Dalai Lama is, of course, a Buddhist leader, here he is recognizing an achievement from another religion. I just love when they do that. There had been whispers over the years that the encyclopedia would never be finished. Having no idea how long something like this could take, Puja Swamiji thought it would be done in a few years. Then, revised estimates guaranteed it would be done by the turn of the millennium. But by 2004 and 2005, people had begun to wonder whether it could actually be accomplished. Every time I heard these whispers, I felt a pang of guilt. My throat would tighten and my breath would shorten. Was I letting my guru down? Was I avoiding the very project I'd been sent to complete? Who was I to second-guess God? But the pangs, strong though they were not as strong as my fear of going near the project. Yes, it was divine. Yes, it was historic and monumentous. Yes, it was the compendium of the cultural heritage of India. And yes, I would drown. Ganga, the holy river, is divine. She is the liberator, the purifier, the mother goddess. And if you go in too deep or bathe at the wrong spot, you will drown. Her divinity does not preclude the possibility of her killing you. The Encyclopedia project felt the same. It would swallow me alive if I ever went near it. So, as I sat on that October morning, with the rays of a still warm autumn sun flooding the room from high windows, I smiled. The publisher had produced a digital print and wrapped it in decorate cellophane for Puja Swamiji. Tied with a bow, after ceremonially opening the bow and paper, he laid it on the table. Thank God, it is done. Finally. As Swamiji and the publisher discussed plans for the launch with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I reached towards the large glass coffee table at the center of the room to pick up the dummy copy. I opened it carefully, greeted by beautifully golden plates on the inside front pages. The Encyclopedia of Hinduism, a project of India Heritage Research Foundation. I flipped through the opening pages. Publishers' details, lists of editorial teams and the board of trustees. Then a several-page list of contributing scholars, alphabetized by first name. Who does that? I had never seen a list alphabetized by first name. I then skimmed through the articles. The content was rich and deep, esoteric and profound. But in several places, there were grammatical mistakes. The style of writing felt, in some articles, far from that to be expected in a scholarly publication. And in a few places, the content, while factually correct, did not seem it would go over well with the international audience Pujya Swamiji was hoping to touch and inspire. Do we really believe that failing to take oil baths properly can lead to a loss of your children? I asked Pujya Swamiji after the meeting ended and the group left. Do the scriptures really say that? What are you talking about? He looked at me curiously. It says here, I replied, reading from one of the entries, that our scriptures detail exactly when and how one must take an oil bath, and failing to do so properly can lead to a loss of health, wealth, and children. I closed the book. Really? Children will die because their mom had an oil bath at the wrong time, or their dad, or they did it in the wrong way? Of course not, he said. Show me. I opened the book and put it on his lap. He read the entry. Ah, yes, Abhyanga. They are speaking about the detailed instructions given in Ayurveda for health including practices, including oil massage. If one loses health, then usually one loses financial security as well. Perhaps the original passage mentions children or family as well, but it doesn't actually mean that your children will die. It simply is emphasizing that through these healthful practices, one can safeguard one's health and good fortune. Yes, you are right, though. It should not be written like this. This could be misunderstood. Actually, I said carefully, there are some other places where I'm not sure the phrasing is done correctly. You must go through it, he said, no longer paying attention to the 10-foot energetic pole I had erected between me and this project. I will tell them nothing can be published until you've seen it. Thus began the next 3 years of my life, my inseparable marriage to the Encyclopedia of Hinduism. I went nowhere without the 3-inch thick books, bound by the blue plastic spirals, with cover pages reading, Encyclopedia of Hinduism, volume whatever. As I had done for the encyclopedia on the teachings of the mother of the Aurobindo ashram a decade earlier, I went through the pages line by line, pen in hand. Mostly it read beautifully. Review by 8 top scholars ensured that most articles were ready for publication, but many weren't. In most of those cases, the issue was one of translation from the author's native tongue into English or untraditional uses of English words. Yes, ass is a synonym for donkey, but no, it's not the first meaning that occurs to most English speakers. Better to write donkey. As I spent my days reading every word and scrutinizing every comma of what turned out to be more than 7,000 articles, I was often transported to another time and place. The kingdom of the Mainakini, the temples decorated with a Hoysala form of architecture, the grassy fields of Vrindavan, on which Krishna and the gopis danced the Rasa Lila. The challenge was staying grounded enough in my intellectual brain to catch the difference between its without a comma and its with a comma, or there in the possessive sense, or there in the locative sense, while permitting myself to be swept up in the river of wisdom and culture. I laughed as I removed literally the indefinite article from places it didn't belong and inserted it in places it did. The sages are right, of course. One can never escape one's karma. I had spent 10 years confidently separate from this mammoth project, careful to keep myself getting swept up in its tide. Clearly, though, it was work I needed to do. The universe had let me feel in control for a while, even to feel that my guru was listening to me and not making me do something I didn't want to do. And now, here I was, not merely reviewing some of the encyclopedia, but reading every word of it. Well, I thought the illusion of control was nice while it lasted. And far from my drowning or suffocating in the project, the river absorbed me. It swept me up, but I didn't drown. I stayed afloat, touched and taught deeply as my eyes ran dry, but my heart stayed wet. The only challenge, really, was the people I had to work with. India is a country that worships the divine feminine. Many days a year are dedicated to the celebration of the feminine. Ganga, earth, India, creation, the cow, it's all mother. Everyone chants, Bharat Mata Ki Jaya, Ganga Mata Ki Jaya, Prithvi Mata Ki Jaya, Go Mata Ki Jaya. Glory to Mother India, glory to Mother Ganga, glory to Mother Earth, to Mother Cow, etc. Yet, on the ground, day to day, in the worlds of religion and academia, women are seen as having inherently less value unless a man needs a snack or a cup of tea. Yes, there are extraordinary respected women of both religion and academia, but in general, to be a woman is a liability. To be white and female is a double whammy. To be white, female, and young is more or less equivalent to being an earthworm. I was white, female, and not yet 40, so there was no way I could know anything. Why, they all wanted to know, why, oh why, is Pujya Swamiji listening to a white girl? In Indian culture, regardless of age, one is considered a girl until marriage and childbirth. An extraneous or missing comma here and there, an omitted footnote indicator now and then, scattered misspellings and occasional inadvertent insertions of some extra letters. Attained instead of attained, what does it matter? Why is a saint of such great stature permitting this project to be held up for? I was raised and schooled to believe these things matter. If the project were for an audience of Indians or spiritual seekers only, perhaps these kinds of mistakes wouldn't matter. But my dear, dear Guru had spent 20 plus years working nights, traveling on 1 city per day tours to raise awareness of a project that was not just preaching to the choir. It was to be accepted as the authentic textual reference for academic and scholastic institutions on all things Hinduism. Every spelling error, every grammatical mistake undermined the very nature of the project. I couldn't overlook that. So I edited all the articles by hand for spelling, grammar, and style, and for things that, while present in the voluminous Hindu scriptures, weren't helpful to mention. For instance, the admonition against taking an oil bath on the wrong day of the week, or a reference to God being strengthened by ghee, clarified butter, poured into fire. Really? God needs ghee. I also edited some of the word choices, much to the dismay and consternation of our editor-in-chief. Goddess Sitala, the goddess of smallpox, roams the countryside on her ass, became Goddess Sitala, the goddess of smallpox, is believed to ride her donkey through the countryside, protecting the villagers. What is wrong with ass? The editor-in-chief wanted to know. It is a valid and widely accepted word for donkey. What is wrong with it? Pujya Swamiji asked me. I can't explain exactly what's wrong with saying the goddess roams the countryside on her ass, but please, just trust me on this, I begged him. We can't say it like that. He did accept my edit, thankfully, but not before the editor-in-chief, not realizing he was on speakerphone during his conversation with Pujya Swamiji, pronounced in dismay, I've been teaching English since before she was born. I had to ask myself, who am I to be doing this project? Who am I to have been trusted with such an important task? I thought back to the memos my mom would correct in red pen and send back to her boss during her days in business. I thought back to the innumerable conversations in our car as we drove around LA, with my mom and dad pointing to random billboards and quizzing me on what mistakes were there. I used to roll my eyes and ask, who cares? But now I was grateful for my mom's critical eye, thankful for the gentle chiding they'd give if I dared say, it's me, in response to, who is it? On the phone or in a doorway. It is I, my dad would say softly but firmly. And now I cared. I was thankful also to have been an avid reader from an early age. Nancy Drew and even Hercule Poirot. Wow. Another name I would have no idea how to pronounce. Poirot. Poirot. I don't know. Probably French. And I think the French just sneeze on the keyboard, and whatever keys their sneeze touch, that's what goes into spelling the word. Anyway, she is grateful, our author, that these authors in turn got their grammar right. It's Poirot. Well, thank you for telling me, dear Solaris. I was not thankful for the stress, however. The only thing that made it worthwhile was the occasional laugh with Pujya Swamiji about the encyclopedia. We could write about the making of the Encyclopedia of Hinduism. Mostly the thing that pushed me day after day to write another lengthy email to publishers who, when 100 corrections were sent to them, entered only 50 and introduced 25 new mistakes, was an inexplicable devotion to a culture that was not mine, but had adopted me with open arms. Why and how did I care so deeply about protecting a religion I barely knew? Why was I prepared to lose sleep and sacrifice the time and peace of my days to ensure that this culture and heritage are correctly portrayed in both letter and spirit? Since the beginning of my time in Rishikesh, I have felt a deep loyalty to the culture and religion of India. It is so frequently misinterpreted and misunderstood, even by its own scholars, particularly those schooled in India in institutions whose classes are conducted in English. There is an ironic and troubling trend among these graduates toward disparaging their own tradition and worshipping all things Western and modern. There is an unspoken but commonly held truth that whatever your grandparents did or believed is backward, and that which appears in TV series and movies and on the internet is progressive and sophisticated and therefore better. Somehow, I became a self-made advocate for India and Hinduism, and editing the encyclopedia nurtured that seed in me. By the time of the Dalai Lama's arrival in April of 2010, only 3 volumes were ready, so the event was recast as a preview and blessing ceremony. It was historic and exciting, graced by revered spiritual leaders of all the traditions, as well as national and political heads, social heads, and celebrities. Watching the Dalai Lama reach out and hug Pujya Swamiji, grab at his beard and ruffle his hair. "Not fair," he repeated jokingly. "You have much, and I have little." Loosened the knots of tension in my mind and shoulders regarding the remaining volumes. By the summer of 2014, we were done, not only with all the editing and corrections, but also with our publishers. After a succession of India publishers had breached their contracts in myriad ways, we signed with an international company, Mandala Publishing, based in California. They redesigned the volumes, improved the illustrations, and prepared gorgeous new covers. We now were ready, with joy and pride, to offer these volumes to the world, beginning with the President of India. As I stood for the national anthem at President House on June 23, 2014, tears streamed down my eyes and cheeks onto the table in front of me. Oh boy, is this the national anthem of India? I am not going to know how to properly recite this. I'll do my best though. Jana Gana Mana Adhinayaka Jaya He Bharata Bhagya Vitata Punjab Sindh Gujarat Maratha Dravida Utkala Banga Vindhya Himachala Yamuna Ganga Uchala Jaladhi Dharanga Tava Shubha Name Jaghe Tava Shubha Asisa Mange Gahe Tava Jaya Gatha Janagana Mangala Dayaka Jaya He Bharata Bhagya Vidhata Jaya He Jaya He Jaya He Jaya 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 He. We bow to you, the ruler of the collective mind of our people. Thou art the Lord of India's destiny. Thy name rouses the heart of the people and the land of Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat and Maratha, of the southern states, Odisha and Bengal. Thy name echoes in the hills of India and the Himalayas, mingles in the music of the flowing waters of Ganga and Yamuna, and is chanted by the rising waves of the Indian Sea. The people sing thy name and praise. They pray for thy blessings. They sing the song of your victory. Glory to thee, the giver of good fortune to all people. Thou art the Lord of India's destiny. Victory, victory, victory to thee. Fortunately, my speech was not immediately following the national anthem, for it took a while for my eyes to dry. It was done. It was really done. And it was gorgeous and perfect. Well, perhaps not exactly perfect, but by all standards of Eastern and Western perfection, it was close enough. Later that year, we launched it in the presence of the Vice President of India, the head of the Rashtriya Sevak Sangh, India's largest national organization, and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, David Cameron. When Pujya Swamiji chanted, Ano Bhadra Krutavo Yantu Vishwataha, may all the noble truths come from all directions, Cameron said, "That's really good. I will use that." When the editor-in-chief publicly thanked me for my great role in the project, and then clarified that the great role I played was always graciously ensuring that they had a ready supply of tea and snacks during their numerous conferences at the ashram, I smiled. Mother India. And so ends our 42nd chapter on the Encyclopedia of India. Clearly, such a monumental task had to be included in this story by our author. So I thank her for including us on feeling what it feels like just a little bit to go through a decades-long journey of performing such a Herculean task to make an encyclopedia and have it readable for an international audience on all things Hindu, which is no small feat at all. And we can be grateful that such a task was completed, as no doubt many of the things that we learn now today probably at some point have come from reference to that Encyclopedia of Hinduism. Now that I've been made aware of it, looking at so many references, I see it all the time, and it's clearly something that has succeeded both in the ability to convey sublime spiritual truths and in its ability to be a academic and scholarly reference for many. Thank you for listening. Namaste.